The $100 bills hit the white tablecloth like a slap in the face. 10 neat stacks, each worth $10,000, spread across the finest linen of Le Bernardin's most exclusive table. $100,000, Marcus Wellington announced, his voice dripping with contempt as he looked up at Maya Johnson, the 30-year-old black waitress who stood frozen beside his table. All you have to do is serve me my entire meal tonight in perfect Mandarin Chinese. The crystal champagne flute in his manicured hand caught the light as he leaned back, savoring the moment. Around them, the restaurant's elite clientele had gone silent, forks suspended midway to mouths, conversations dying mid-sentence. Someone raised a phone, starting to record. Not just hello and thank you, he continued, his gray eyes glinting with malicious pleasure. I want you to explain every dish, every wine pairing, answer my questions, everything, in Chinese. His smile was cruel. I bet you've never even heard Mandarin properly, have you? What was it, the Bronx, Brooklyn, one of those neighborhoods? Maya's fingers tightened on her order pad, but she didn't move, didn't speak. Not yet. And when you fail, Marcus added, loud enough for the entire dining room to hear, you'll admit you're nothing but a diversity hire who doesn't belong in a place like this. The challenge hung in the air like a blade. What Marcus Wellington didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that Maya Johnson spoke 9 languages fluently, and she was about to change everything. You have a deal, she said quietly. The millionaire's grin widened, certain he'd already won. He was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The crystal chandelier at Le Bernardin cast dancing shadows across Marcus Wellington's platinum watch as he leaned back in his chair, surveying the restaurant like a king examining his domain. At 62, with silver temples and a suit that cost more than most people's cars, he had the kind of presence that made waiters nervous and managers obsequious. Tonight, however, he was in a particularly foul mood. Maya Johnson, 30 years old with natural hair pulled back in an elegant bun, approached his table with practiced grace. She'd been serving at this upscale Manhattan restaurant for 3 years, and she'd dealt with plenty of difficult customers. But something about this man's sneer made her spine straighten with caution. Good evening, sir. My name is Maya, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with your best champagne, Marcus interrupted, not looking up from his phone. Dom Perignon, 2008 vintage, and make sure the glass is properly chilled. Last time I was here, the service was abysmal. Maya nodded professionally. Of course, sir. I'll ensure everything is to your satisfaction. As she turned to leave, Marcus's voice stopped her. Actually, wait. He looked up, his gray eyes scanning her from head to toe with barely concealed disdain. You're new here, aren't you? I've been with Le Bernardin for 3 years, sir. Really? His tone dripped with skepticism. And they have you serving in the main dining room? How progressive. Maya felt the familiar sting of prejudice but maintained her composure. She'd grown up in the Bronx, the daughter of a subway conductor and a seamstress, but what Marcus Wellington didn't know was that her grandmother had been a linguistics professor at Columbia before retiring. Maya had inherited her gift for languages, spending her childhood summers learning everything from Mandarin to Arabic, French to Russian. Books and languages had been her escape from a neighborhood where dreams often died young. The champagne, sir? She prompted gently. Marcus waved dismissively. Yes, but first let me ask you something. He leaned forward, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Where did you grow up? Let me guess. Somewhere in the Bronx? Brooklyn? One of those neighborhoods where they teach you to say ax instead of ask? The couple at the adjacent table shifted uncomfortably. Maya's fingers tightened on her order pad, but her expression remained neutral. I'll get your champagne right away, sir. No, don't run off yet, Marcus said, his voice growing louder, drawing attention from nearby diners. I'm curious about something. You see, I have business partners flying in from Beijing next week. Very important deal. $1 billion territory. He paused for effect. I bet you've never even heard Mandarin spoken properly, have you? Maya's heart began to race, but not from embarrassment. From opportunity. I've had some exposure to different languages, sir, she said carefully. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that echoed across the refined space. Exposure? What? From taking orders at a Chinese takeout place? He pulled out his wallet, extracting a thick stack of $100 bills. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. A little wager, if you will. The restaurant had grown quieter. Even the soft classical music seemed to fade into the background. The maitre d' hovered nervously near the entrance, unsure whether to intervene. I'm listening, Maya said. Marcus spread 10 stacks of bills on the white tablecloth, each band indicating $10,000. $100,000, cash, right here, right now. His eyes glinted with malicious amusement. All you have to do is serve me my entire meal tonight in perfect Mandarin Chinese. Not just hello and thank you. I want you to explain every dish, every wine pairing, answer my questions, everything, in Chinese. A gasp rippled through the nearby tables. Someone discreetly raised their phone, beginning to record. And if I can't? Maya asked, her voice steady. Then you admit, in front of everyone here, that you're nothing but a diversity hire who doesn't belong in a place like this. You apologize for wasting my time and you send over a real waiter, someone who actually deserves to serve people of my caliber. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, some sympathetic, others curious, a few openly hostile. She thought of her mother who'd worked 16-hour days to put her through college. She thought of her grandmother, who'd taught her that knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away. But most of all, she thought of every time someone had looked at her and seen limitations instead of potential. You have a deal, she said quietly. Marcus's grin widened. Excellent. Oh, and just to make it interesting, I speak fluent Mandarin myself. Lived in Shanghai for 5 years. So don't even think about trying to fake it with some nonsense syllables. Maya nodded, set down her pad, and cleared her throat. When she spoke again, her voice carried across the restaurant in flawless Beijing accented Mandarin. 尊敬的先生，晚上好。我很荣幸今晚为您服务。首先，让我为您介绍我们今晚的特色菜单。我们的主厨为您准备了来自法国西海岸的新鲜生刺，配以香槟醋汁和西香葱。Respected sir, good evening. I am honored to serve you tonight. First, let me introduce our special menu for this evening. Our chef has prepared fresh oysters from the French West Coast, accompanied by champagne vinegar and chives. The color drained from Marcus's face. His champagne glass, which a busboy had just delivered, remained untouched in his suddenly trembling hand. Maya continued, her Mandarin flowing like silk, describing the evening's specials with a vocabulary that revealed not just fluency, but a deep understanding of culinary terminology, wine cultivation, and French cuisine, all in perfect Chinese. She spoke of the terroir of Burgundy wines, the delicate balance of flavors in their bouillabaisse, the precise technique required for their signature langoustine dish. Other diners had completely abandoned their meals, watching the scene unfold. A woman at a corner table whispered to her companion, "Is she really speaking Chinese?" Her husband, who worked at the Chinese consulate, nodded in amazement. Not just Chinese, perfect Mandarin, better than mine, and I was born in Beijing. Marcus's initial shock transformed into desperation. He interrupted in Mandarin, testing her with complex questions about the wine list, about cooking techniques, about the origin of ingredients. Maya responded to each query with eloquence and precision, sometimes adding historical context about French-Chinese culinary exchanges during the colonial period in Vietnam, all in flawless Mandarin. Ni shi zhenme? How did you? Marcus stammered in Chinese, then switched to English. Where did you learn? But Maya wasn't finished. She suddenly switched to Cantonese, explaining that she could also discuss the menu in the dialect his Hong Kong business partners might prefer. Then, as if turning pages in a book, she flowed into Japanese, describing the influence of French cuisine on modern kaiseki, Korean followed, then Arabic, as she detailed halal options for Middle Eastern clients. Russian came next. She mentioned the restaurant's selection of caviar with the easy fluency of a Moscow native. Then French, naturally, given the restaurant's heritage, her accent so perfect that a visiting Parisian chef at a nearby table stood up in surprise. Finally, she demonstrated Portuguese, explaining how the restaurant could accommodate Brazilian or Portuguese guests with traditional wine pairings from the Douro Valley. The entire restaurant had fallen completely silent. Forks rested on plates, conversations forgotten. All eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding at Marcus Wellington's table. Maya returned to English, her voice calm and professional. "Would you prefer I continue serving you in Mandarin this evening, Mr. Wellington? Or would you like to select from one of the other languages? I'm also conversant in Hindi, though not quite at native level, so I didn't include it in my demonstration." Marcus's face had progressed from pale to red to an alarming purple. His hand shook as he reached for his water glass, knocking over the champagne in the process. The golden liquid spread across the white tablecloth, seeping toward the neat stacks of $100 bills. He sputtered. "The money is getting wet, sir," Maya observed mildly, making no move to save the bills. "Should I call someone to help clean this up?" The maitre d' had approached along with the restaurant's general manager, a distinguished woman named Claudette Bernheim, who had been watching from her office through security cameras. "Is everything all right here?" Claudette asked, though her slight smile suggested she knew exactly what had transpired. Marcus grabbed at the soaked bills, trying to salvage his dignity along with his money. This is some kind of setup," he accused. "You planted her here. No waitress knows 8 languages. 9, actually," Maya corrected. "And I'm not just a waitress. I'm pursuing my doctorate in comparative linguistics at Columbia while working here to support my studies. My thesis is on the evolution of tonal languages in multicultural urban environments." A young man at a nearby table had been live-streaming the entire encounter. "This is going viral," he whispered excitedly to his date. "We're already at 50,000 viewers." Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I don't have to—" "Actually," Claudette interrupted smoothly, "you do. You made a very public wager in my restaurant in front of dozens of witnesses, several of whom I notice have recorded the entire exchange." She gestured subtly to the phones pointed in their direction. "I believe you owe Ms. Johnson $100,000. Marcus Wellington stood frozen, his Italian leather shoes planted in a puddle of Dom Perignon that had dripped onto the floor. The entire restaurant waited, holding its collective breath. The cash on the table, $100,000 in neat bundles, lay partially soaked in champagne, a fitting metaphor for his dissolved arrogance. I need to make a call," Marcus muttered, reaching for his phone with unsteady hands. "By all means," Claudette, the general manager, said coolly. "But the wager stands. These people all witnessed it." As Marcus fumbled with his phone, Maya remained perfectly composed, though her mind raced back through the years that had brought her to this moment. She thought of her grandmother, Professor Elsie Johnson, who had been one of the first black women to teach linguistics at Columbia in the 1960s. Elsie had faced her own Marcus Wellingtons, men who believed her place was anywhere but at the front of a classroom, teaching future diplomats and scholars. "Never let them see you sweat, baby," Grandmother Elsie used to say, sitting in their small apartment in the Bronx, surrounded by towers of books in different languages. But more importantly, never let them make you small. You carry your ancestors' dreams in your bones. Maya had been 8 years old when she discovered her gift. It had started with Spanish from their Dominican neighbors, then Mandarin from the family who ran the corner store. Languages didn't just enter her mind, they settled there, made themselves at home. By the time she was 12, she could navigate seamlessly between the Russian of the Brooklyn émigrés, the Arabic of the halal butcher, and the French of her high school teacher who'd noticed her gift and nurtured it. But gifts don't pay bills. When her grandmother died during Maya's junior year at Columbia, she'd left behind 2 things: a legacy of learning and a mountain of medical debt. Maya had made a choice, She could have taken the State Department job offered to her after graduation, could have become a translator at the UN. Instead, she'd taken the night shift at Le Bernardin, which paid surprisingly well and allowed her to attend doctoral classes during the day. "You're overqualified," the hiring manager had said 3 years ago, looking at her resume with suspicion. "I'm qualified to do whatever I need to do to achieve my goals," Maya had responded. Now, watching Marcus Wellington crumble before her, she wondered if this moment had always been waiting for her. A convergence of preparation and opportunity that her grandmother would have called destiny. Marcus had finished his phone call and turned back to face the restaurant. His transformation was subtle but noticeable. The arrogance hadn't entirely left his face, but it had been joined by something else, a calculating look that made Maya instinctively wary. "All right," he said loudly, pulling out his checkbook. "You win. I'm a man of my word." The restaurant erupted in surprised murmurs. Someone started clapping, and soon the applause spread through the dining room. But Maya noticed that Marcus's hand was steady now as he wrote the check. Too steady. "However," Marcus continued, his voice carrying over the applause, "I have a proposition for you, Ms. Johnson, Maya Johnson. Ms. Johnson." He tore the check from the book with a flourish. "This check is yours, $100,000 as promised. But I'd like to offer you something more." Claudette stepped forward. "Mr. Wellington, I don't think—" "Please," Marcus held up a hand. "Let me finish." He turned back to Maya. "You see, what I didn't mention earlier is that I'm not just some racist fool with too much money. Although I played that part convincingly, didn't I?" His smile was sharp. "I'm the CEO of Wellington International Holdings. We're a global consulting firm specializing in facilitating business relationships between American companies and foreign markets." Maya's eyes narrowed. "You are testing me." "No," Marcus said quickly. "Not initially. I was being exactly the ass you thought I was. But now," he gestured to the phones still recording them, "now I see an opportunity. You speak 9 languages fluently. You have a gift that my firm desperately needs. We're expanding into Southeast Asia and the Middle East simultaneously. I need someone who can navigate not just languages but cultures. You just humiliated me in front of all these people," Maya said quietly. "And you just humiliated me right back," Marcus countered. "Rather spectacularly, I might add. That video will probably have 1 million views by morning, but here's the thing. I can either be the villain of that story forever, the racist millionaire who got his comeuppance, or we can write a different ending." He placed the check on a dry section of the table. "The 100,000 is yours either way, but I'm also offering you a position as Senior Cultural Consultant for Wellington International. Starting salary, $350,000 a year, plus bonuses. You'll travel the world, use all those languages, and probably double your salary within 2 years if you're as smart as I think you are." The restaurant was absolutely silent now. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to watch. Maya picked up the check, studying it carefully. It was real. The amount was correct. The signature was valid. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. "You shouldn't," Marcus said bluntly. "I'm a businessman. I see profit where others see problems. But let me tell you something about myself that might matter. My daughter Sarah is about your age. She's brilliant, graduated from Harvard Law, speaks 3 languages. Last year, she was passed over for partner at her firm. They said she was almost there but needed more seasoning. The man they promoted instead? He had half her case wins and couldn't even properly pronounce the names of their international clients. His voice had changed, carrying genuine emotion for the first time. Sarah quit law after that. She teaches high school now in Newark. Says she wants to inspire kids who look like her students. Kids who are brilliant but overlooked. When I watched you speak those languages, when I saw the look on every face in this restaurant, I thought of her." Maya was about to respond when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. The live stream of their encounter already had 2 million views. The comments were pouring in by the thousands. But one message stood out. It was from her mother. "Baby, someone just sent me a video. Is that really you? Are you okay? That man." May I? Maya asked Claudette, who nodded. Maya stepped away for a moment, calling her mother. Mom, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. That man disrespected you, Maya. In front of all those people. I don't care how much money. Mom, remember what Grandma Elsie used to say? About carrying our ancestors' dreams? There was a pause. Then her mother's voice soft with understanding. She also said that sometimes the biggest risk is not taking one. When Maya returned to Marcus's table, she found him signing multiple autographs for other diners who, remarkably, were treating him like a celebrity who'd just performed an elaborate show. The narrative was already shifting, from racist encounter to brilliant revelation of hidden talent. Social media was spinning it as a story of triumph, of hidden depths revealed, of America's untapped potential. Your job, Maya said to Marcus, the consultant position, I have conditions. I expected you would. First, I finish my doctorate. You work around my class schedule for the next 18 months. Done. Second, I want to bring in interns from my neighborhood in the Bronx. Kids with language gifts but no connections. You pay for their training. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. 3 interns per year, paid internships. 5. 4, and they get full-time job offers if they perform well. Deal. Maya paused. And third, you donate $100,000 to Columbia's linguistics program. In my grandmother's name, Professor Elsie Johnson. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his checkbook again. What was her specific area of research? The preservation of African American vernacular English as a legitimate linguistic system and its influence on modern American cultural expression. That's not what I expected. My grandmother believed every language, every dialect, every way of speaking carried history and meaning. She taught me that Chinese and Arabic weren't more valuable than the language of my neighbors. They were all gifts, all worthy of respect. Marcus finished writing the second check. You know, Ms. Johnson, I think I've been going about my business all wrong. I've been hiring people who speak languages. What I should have been hiring were people who understand what language really means. As he handed her both checks, a commotion erupted near the restaurant's entrance. A young woman burst in, her face flushed with anger and exertion. She was professionally dressed but disheveled, as if she'd run several blocks. Maya noticed she had Marcus's same gray eyes and sharp jawline. Dad, the woman shouted across the restaurant. What the hell are you doing? I saw the live stream. She stopped short when she saw Maya. You're the waitress, the one who speaks all those languages. Sarah, Marcus said quietly. I didn't know you were in the city. I drove up from Newark when I saw the video. I thought, Sarah's voice cracked. I thought you were destroying someone else's career with your prejudice. Like you destroyed mine. The restaurant, which had begun to return to normal, fell silent again. Marcus's confident facade finally cracked completely. Sarah, I tried to help you. I made calls. You made it worse. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Every firm in the city knew I was Marcus Wellington's daughter who couldn't make it on her own. Your help was poison, Dad, just like what you were doing to her tonight. She gestured to Maya. Was poison. Until she turned it into medicine. Maya stepped forward. You're Sarah Wellington? You're the reason he offered me the job? Sarah laughed bitterly. Don't take it. Whatever he's offering, don't take it. He doesn't see talent. He sees opportunities to control people. Sarah, please. Marcus started. No, Dad, for once, just stop. Sarah turned to Maya. You know what the saddest part is? He's brilliant at business. Wellington International could be revolutionary. But he's so stuck in his old ways, he can't see that his biggest weakness is his inability to recognize strength in people who don't look like him. Until they force him to see it. Maya looked between father and daughter, seeing the pain that stretched between them. She thought of her own family, of the sacrifices and misunderstandings that had shaped them. Then she made a decision that would change all of their lives. Maya looked at the 2 checks in her hands, $200,000 total, then at the broken relationship between father and daughter playing out before her. The other diners had given up any pretense of not watching. This was better than dinner theater. This was real life at its most raw and revealing. "Sarah," Maya said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your father made me an offer. Senior cultural consultant at Wellington International. $350,000 a year." Sarah's eyes widened. That's more than he paid his last VP of operations." "I know," Maya said calmly. "I looked up your company before I decided to engage with his bet. Wellington International has been losing contracts in Asia for the past 3 years. Your stock price has dropped 18%. You're hemorrhaging talent because your competitors offer better cultural integration." She turned to Marcus. "You don't need a translator, Mr. Wellington. You need a complete restructuring of how you approach international business." Marcus's jaw dropped. "You researched my company during your shift?" "I have a phone, and you were being insufferable while I took your order. I had 30 seconds. Maya pulled out her phone, showing a screen full of financial data. "Your problem isn't language barriers, it's cultural ignorance. Your Bangkok office just lost the Siam commercial account because your representative brought leather folders as gifts to a Hindu executive meeting. Your Dubai team scheduled major presentations during Ramadan fast hours. Your Beijing office uses the number 4 in their phone extensions, death number in Chinese culture." Sarah stepped closer, intrigued despite her anger. "You got all that from public records?" "Public records, employment reviews on Glassdoor, and some creative searching through LinkedIn posts from former employees. Your company is bleeding talent and contracts because it treats culture as a checkbox rather than a foundation." Maya set the checks on the table. "So here's my counteroffer." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. "Counteroffer?" Marcus asked. "I don't want to be your employee," Maya said. "I want to be your partner. I'll take the 100,000 from the bet. That's mine fair and square. But instead of a salary, I want to create a subsidiary company, Johnson Cultural Consulting, working exclusively with Wellington International for the first 2 years. You don't just get me, you get the team I build, starting with your daughter." "What?" Sarah and Marcus said simultaneously. "Sarah, you speak 3 languages and have international law expertise. You understand the legal implications of cross-cultural business in ways your father's current team doesn't. You're also a teacher now, which means you know how to break down complex concepts for different audiences." Maya turned to Marcus. "Your biggest mistake wasn't overlooking your daughter's talent. It was poisoning her reputation by trying to force doors open instead of letting her open them herself." The restaurant had become so quiet that the soft jazz from the speakers seemed inappropriately cheerful. Maya continued, her voice gaining strength as she laid out a vision that had been forming in her mind from the moment Sarah had burst through the door. "Here's what's going to happen. The video of tonight has already gone viral. 4 million views and climbing. By tomorrow, everyone will know who I am, who you are, and what happened here. We can let that narrative destroy your company's reputation. Racist CEO humiliated by brilliant waitress. Or we can control it." Claudette, the restaurant manager, had approached with a bottle of wine and glasses, setting them down silently. She gave Maya an almost imperceptible nod of approval. "We announced tomorrow that this was the most unconventional job interview in corporate history," Maya continued. "That Wellington International is launching a revolutionary new approach to global business, led by the woman who speaks 9 languages and understands dozens of cultures. We bring in Sarah not as the CEO's daughter, but as the co-founder of this new division. Her legal expertise, my linguistic abilities, and a team of diverse consultants will build together." "This is insane," Marcus muttered, but his eyes were sharp with interest. "This is America," Maya corrected. "The land where a waitress from the Bronx can become a business partner with a Manhattan millionaire, if she's smart enough and brave enough to seize the moment." Sarah had been silent, studying Maya with an intensity that reminded Maya of her grandmother evaluating a particularly complex linguistic pattern. Finally, she spoke. "You know, 3 hours ago, I was grading papers in Newark, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life leaving law." "And?" Maya prompted. And now I'm wondering if everything that happened, the discrimination, the failure, even teaching, was preparing me for this exact moment. Sarah turned to her father. She's right, Dad. Your company is dying. Not quickly, but inevitably. Your old boy network can't navigate the new world. But this, she gestured between herself and Maya. This could work. Marcus sank into his chair, the wet tablecloth squelching beneath his elbows. For the first time all evening, he looked his age. 62 years of building walls and bridges, making deals and breaking spirits. My father, he said quietly, came to this country from Scotland with nothing. Couldn't read, could barely write. He built Wellington International from a single import shop in Queens. This was new information, not available in any corporate biography. Maya and Sarah both leaned in. He was mocked for his accent every day, Marcus continued. Called stupid, worthless foreign trash. So he made me speak perfect American English. No accent, no slang, nothing that would mark us as outsiders. I spent so much time trying to fit into their world that I became worse than them. I became someone who crushed others the way they'd crushed him. He looked up at Sarah. When you were passed over for partner, it killed something in me. Because I saw my father in your eyes. That same look of not understanding why being brilliant wasn't enough. So I tried to fix it the only way I knew how. With force, with connections, with money. Dad. Sarah's voice was soft. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Marcus said quickly. I'm just trying to explain. I built walls because I was taught that's how you protect yourself. But walls keep out opportunities too. He turned to Maya. Your grandmother, Professor Johnson. I actually attended one of her lectures once, years ago. She said something I never forgot. Language isn't about words. It's about building bridges between worlds. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. You knew my grandmother. I was auditing classes at Columbia, trying to improve my business credentials. She was formidable. She called on me once, asked me to explain the linguistic implications of code switching in corporate environments. I couldn't answer. I was so focused on eliminating any trace of difference that I couldn't see the strength in adaptation. The revelation hung in the air. The universe seemed to be folding in on itself, connections forming that had been decades in the making. The live stream is at 10 million views, someone called out from across the restaurant. You're trending #1 worldwide. Maya's phone buzzed incessantly. Reporters were calling, talent agents, other restaurants offering her jobs, language schools wanting her to teach. But she ignored them all, focused on the two people in front of her. So, she said, do we have a deal? Marcus looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Maya. Then, for the first time in 3 years, Sarah sat down at the same table as her father. We need contracts, Sarah said, her legal mind already working. Proper structure. Maya needs to maintain controlling interest in Johnson Cultural Consulting. We need to establish clear boundaries between the subsidiary and the parent company. Agreed, Marcus said, his business instincts reawakening. But Wellington International gets exclusive rights to the consulting services for 2 years. 18 months, Maya countered, with option to extend based on performance metrics. Performance goes both ways, Sarah added. If Wellington International doesn't implement at least 70% of our recommendations, we can break the exclusivity clause. They negotiated there, in the middle of Le Bernardin, as waiters worked around them and other diners took photos and videos. Claudette brought fresh tablecloths and more wine. The chef sent out complimentary dishes. The entire restaurant had become invested in this unlikely business deal being born from conflict. 3 hours later, as the restaurant was closing, they had the framework of an agreement sketched out on napkins and paper placemats. Sarah had called a friend from law school who specialized in corporate structure. Marcus had his CFO on speaker, running numbers. Maya had reached out to 3 of her doctoral colleagues who specialized in different cultural studies. There's one more thing, Maya said as they prepared to leave. The 4 interns from the Bronx. That stays in the deal. 5, Marcus said unexpectedly. 5 interns. and we'll pay for their college if they don't already have degrees. Maya extended her hand. Marcus shook it, his grip firm but respectful. Then Sarah shook her hand too, and something shifted in the air. Three people from vastly different worlds, finding common ground in the most unlikely place. As they gathered their things, Claudette approached with a leather folder. "Your check, Mr. Wellington, for tonight's meal." Marcus laughed genuinely this time. "After everything that's happened, you're still charging me for dinner?" "Oh no," Claudette smiled. "This is for the 3 bottles of Dom Perignon you effectively purchased when you knocked over the first one. The meal is complimentary. Consider it our investment in what I suspect will be a very interesting business relationship." Outside the restaurant, the December air was crisp and clear. The city hummed with its usual energy, unaware that 3 lives had just changed course. They stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure how to end this strange evening. "I should get back to Newark," Sarah said. "I have papers to grade, although—" She looked at Maya. "I might be putting in my resignation soon." "Don't," Maya advised. "Not yet. Finish the school year. Your students deserve that. We'll build this properly, not in haste." Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile Maya had seen from her. "You're right. My students come first." Marcus had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "Maya, can I ask you something? When you made that bet with me, when you accepted my challenge, did you know how it would end?" Maya thought of her grandmother, of the languages swirling in her mind, of the path that had led from a Bronx apartment to this Manhattan sidewalk. "No," she said honestly. "But I knew it was time for it to begin." A taxi pulled up, and Sarah climbed in. Before the door closed, she called out, "Maya, check your email tomorrow. I'm sending you something." As the taxi disappeared into the river of taillights, Marcus turned to Maya. "This is either the smartest or stupidest thing I've ever done." "Probably both," Maya agreed. "The best decisions usually are." Marcus laughed again, and for a moment, Maya could see the young man he'd been, the son of a Scottish immigrant trying to make his way in a new world. "Your grandmother," he said. "She would have been proud of you tonight." "She would have been proud of all of us," Maya corrected, "for choosing bridges over walls." The next morning, Maya woke to find 847 emails, 200 text messages, and 50 voicemails. The video of her confrontation with Marcus had reached 30 million views. News outlets from around the world wanted interviews. The headline on the New York Times read, "The waitress who spoke truth to power in 9 languages." But the message that mattered most was from Sarah. The subject line read, "The beginning." Inside was a single attachment, a photo from what looked like the 1960s. A young black woman stood at a Columbia University podium, commanding the attention of a packed lecture hall. In the front row, barely visible, sat a much younger man with distinctive features and intense eyes. Sarah's message read, "Found this in Columbia's archives. Your grandmother, teaching language as liberation, 1967. Look at the front row, 3rd seat from the left." Maya zoomed in and gasped. The young man in the photo was unmistakably William Wellington, Marcus's father. He was taking notes intently, completely absorbed in Professor Elsie Johnson's lecture. Below the photo, Sarah had written, "Some bridges take generations to build. Let's make sure we complete this one." 6 months later, Maya stood in the gleaming conference room of Wellington International's 42nd floor offices, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The spring sun cast long shadows between the buildings, creating a chessboard of light and dark across the city. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of voices as the board of directors filed in for what would be the most important meeting of her life. Johnson Cultural Consulting had exceeded every projection. In half a year, they'd saved Wellington International $15 million in recovered contracts and prevented the loss of 3 major Asian clients. Maya's team, now 12 strong, including the 5 Bronx interns who were exceeding all expectations, had revolutionized how the company approached international business. But success had come with a price. "They're going to try to force you out," Sarah whispered, joining Maya at the window. She was dressed in a sharp navy suit, her legal training evident in every precisely chosen word. Harrison and the old guard have been planning this for weeks. Thomas Harrison, the board chairman and Marcus's longtime rival, had been undermining their efforts from day one. He represented the old Wellington International, the one that believed money spoke louder than culture. That force was better than finesse. "Let them try," Maya said calmly, though her heart was racing. "I have something they don't expect." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Care to share?" "You'll see." The boardroom filled quickly. 12 members, mostly older white men with a sprinkling of women who'd fought their way up through the same hostile system. Marcus sat at the far end, his face unreadable. The past 6 months had aged him in some ways, softened him in others. The viral video from the restaurant had actually helped the company's image initially, but old habits died hard in corporate America. Harrison called the meeting to order, his voice dripping with false courtesy. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for joining us. We've been reviewing the performance of Johnson Cultural Consulting." "The performance has been exceptional," Marcus interjected. "The numbers speak for themselves." "The numbers are one thing," Harrison countered. "But we've received concerns about methods, about the message we're sending to our traditional partners." Maya had expected this. 3 of their oldest clients, companies run by men who looked a lot like Harrison, had complained about having to adapt to what they called politically correct nonsense. "You mean the message that Wellington International respects the cultures of the countries where we do business?" Maya asked evenly. Harrison's face reddened. "We've been successful for 50 years without—" "You've been losing ground for the last 10, Maya interrupted. "Would you like me to show you the graphs? The decline started exactly when your competitors began implementing cultural intelligence programs." "This isn't about graphs." Harrison slammed his hand on the table. "This is about a waitress." "Yes, I said it. A waitress who got lucky with a viral video trying to tell us how to run a company built over generations." The room went silent. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. This was the real prejudice, finally voiced aloud. Maya reached into her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, aged and yellowed. "Mr. Harrison, you're right about one thing. This company was built over generations, but not the way you think." She opened the folder, revealing old documents and photographs. 6 months ago, after Sarah sent me that photo of my grandmother with William Wellington, I did some research. Deep research. Into the history of Wellington International. Marcus leaned forward. "What kind of research?" "The kind that reveals why William Wellington really attended my grandmother's lectures at Columbia. The kind that explains why he was so interested in language and cultural bridging." Maya pulled out a document. "This is the original incorporation papers for Wellington International filed in 1968. Notice anything interesting about the founding partners?" Harrison grabbed the document, his face paling as he read. This can't be real." "What is it?" another board member asked. Maya displayed a photograph on the conference room screen. It showed William Wellington and Professor Elsie Johnson standing together outside a building in Queens, a sign between them reading, "Wellington Johnson Import Specialists." "My grandmother wasn't just William Wellington's teacher," Maya announced. "She was his silent partner. She provided the cultural insights and language expertise that made Wellington International possible. She translated documents, negotiated with foreign suppliers, taught William how to navigate different cultural expectations. She owned 30% of the original company." The boardroom erupted in shocked exclamations. Marcus stood up, his face ashen. "That's impossible. My father never mentioned—" "Because in 1968 it wasn't safe for a black woman to be publicly known as part owner of a major company," Maya continued. "Your father bought her out in 1971, just before the company went public. But here's the interesting part." She pulled out another document. The buyout agreement included a clause. If any descendant of Elsie Johnson ever sought employment at Wellington International, they would be granted special consideration and opportunity. Sarah grabbed the document, her legal mind racing through the implications. "This is legally binding." "This means—" This means I'm not just some waitress who got lucky, Maya said, looking directly at Harrison. I'm the granddaughter of the woman who helped build this company. I'm here by right, not by chance. Harrison's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Even if this is true, it doesn't change the fact that your methods are alienating our traditional base. You mean the base that's shrinking every year? Maya pulled up a presentation on the screen. Let me show you something else I discovered. The screen displayed a series of financial charts. 3 of your traditional partners, the ones complaining about our cultural programs, are under federal investigation for international business practices. 2 more are about to lose their licenses to operate in China because of cultural violations. Your traditional base is dying, Mr. Harrison. Not because of political correctness, but because the world has changed. She clicked to the next slide. Meanwhile, the contracts we've secured using Johnson Cultural Consulting's methods have come from companies that will dominate the next 50 years. Tech firms, renewable energy, international healthcare. We're not alienating your base, we're evolving beyond it. Marcus had been silent, studying the old photographs. Now he looked up, and there were tears in his eyes. My father and your grandmother, they built this together. For 3 years, Maya confirmed, until it became too dangerous. Your father was getting threats for working with a black woman. My grandmother was accused of betraying her community by helping a white man's business. They made a business decision to separate, but the foundation of Wellington International, the understanding that language and culture are the keys to international success, that came from both of them. Sarah had been reviewing the legal documents. There's more, she said quietly. The buyout agreement, the amount paid to Professor Johnson. It was massive for 1971, enough to buy a building, establish trusts. She looked at Maya. Enough to ensure her family would have opportunities for generations. Maya nodded. My grandmother used that money to put dozens of kids from the Bronx through college. She established the Johnson Language Institute, which operated until she died. She never told anyone where the money came from. I only found out when I started digging through her papers after that night at the restaurant. Harrison stood up. This changes nothing. The board has already decided. We're terminating the consulting agreement. Actually, a voice from the doorway said, You're not. Everyone turned to see a woman in her 80s enter the room, moving slowly but with undeniable authority. She was elegantly dressed, her silver hair perfectly styled, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence. Maya gasped. Mrs. Chen? Lily Chen, one of Wellington International's original investors and still its largest individual shareholder, walked to the center of the room. I've been listening from the antechamber. Thomas, sit down before you have a stroke. Harrison sat, too shocked to argue. Mrs. Chen continued. I knew William Wellington and Elsie Johnson. I was one of their first clients, back when I was importing textiles from Hong Kong. Elsie helped me navigate the prejudice against Chinese businesses in the 1960s. William provided the financial backing when no bank would loan to an Asian woman. She turned to Maya. I've been watching you for 6 months, young lady, waiting to see if you had your grandmother's strength and wisdom. You do. Then she faced the board. As the majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote. Not on terminating Johnson Cultural Consulting, but on replacing Thomas Harrison as board chairman. All in favor? 7 hands shot up immediately. Harrison looked around wildly, realizing he'd been outmaneuvered. Furthermore, Mrs. Chen continued, I'm proposing that Johnson Cultural Consulting be formally absorbed into Wellington International as a full division, with Maya Johnson as Executive Vice President of Cultural Strategy, and Sarah Wellington as Chief Legal Counsel for International Operations. Marcus stood up. I second the motion. The vote was unanimous except for Harrison, who stormed out of the room, followed by his 2 closest allies. As the remaining board members filed out, discussing the implications of the vote, Mrs. Chen approached Maya. Your grandmother would be so proud. She always said her granddaughter would one day reclaim what was meant to be. You knew she had a granddaughter? Maya asked. You knew about me? Mrs. Chen smiled. Elsie and I remained friends until she passed. She told me about the brilliant little girl who could speak 5 languages by age 10. She said, "One day, Lily, that girl will find her way to where she belongs. And when she does, make sure she knows her worth." She handed Maya an envelope. "Elsie gave me this years ago. Said to give it to you when the time was right." Maya opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter in her grandmother's elegant handwriting. "My dearest Maya, if you're reading this, then you've found your way to the place I always knew you belonged." Wellington International was as much mine as it was William's, built on the belief that understanding between cultures could change the world. I walked away not in defeat, but in strategy. I knew that someday, when the world was ready, a Johnson would return to claim not just ownership but leadership. That person is you. Don't just take your place at the table, baby. Transform the table itself. All my love, Grandma Elsie P.S. William Wellington was a good man trapped in a prejudiced time. His son Marcus inherited both his father's ambition and his father's guilt. Be gentle with him. Healing takes time. Maya was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Sarah put an arm around her shoulders, and surprisingly, Marcus did too. "We have work to do," Marcus said quietly. 50 years of work, to build the company my father and your grandmother really envisioned. Maya wiped her tears, standing tall. "Then let's get started." But as they left the boardroom together, an unlikely trio united by history and hope, none of them noticed Harrison in the security office, downloading files onto a flash drive, his face set in grim determination. The war for Wellington International's soul wasn't over, it was just beginning. 3 weeks after the boardroom coup, Maya arrived at the office at 5 a.m. to find the building in chaos. Security guards were running through the halls. IT personnel were frantically typing at computers, and Marcus stood in the lobby, his face grave. "Harrison," he said simply. "He didn't just download files. He planted something. Our entire Asian division database has been encrypted. Ransomware. He's demanding $50 million or he releases all our client information to our competitors." Maya's blood ran cold. "Can we trace it back to him?" "He was too smart. He used offshore servers, anonymous cryptocurrency wallets. The FBI is involved, but they say it could take months to build a case." Sarah arrived, having received the emergency call. "How long do we have?" 72 hours, Marcus replied. "Then he releases everything. Trade secrets, client lists, private negotiations. It would destroy us." They convened in the war room as they'd come to call the executive conference space. The head of IT laid out the grim situation. The encryption was military grade, unbreakable without the key. Paying the ransom would bankrupt the company and likely encourage more attacks. Not paying would mean the end of Wellington International. "There has to be another way," Maya insisted, pacing the room. Something nagged at her, a memory from her grandmother's papers. "Wait," she said suddenly. "Sarah, in the legal documents from 1971, was there anything about company records? Archives?" Sarah pulled up the files on her laptop. "There's a mention of duplicate records being maintained independently. Maya, what are you thinking?" Maya was already on her phone calling her mother. "Mom, Grandma Elsie's old filing cabinets in the storage unit. Are they still there?" "Of course, baby. We never had the heart to throw them away." "Why?" "I need you to go there. Now. Look for anything labeled Wellington or WI." While her mother drove to the storage facility in the Bronx, Maya explained her hunch. "My grandmother was meticulous. She documented everything. If she was really a silent partner, she would have kept her own records." "But those would be 50 years old," Marcus protested. "How would that help with current—" "Not the data itself," Maya interrupted. "The patterns, the relationships, the foundation of trust she built with Asian partners. If we can prove continuity, show our clients that Wellington International's relationship with them goes back to my grandmother's time, maybe they'll give us grace to rebuild." 2 hours later, Maya's mother called back. "Baby, you're not going to believe this. There are dozens of boxes here, all labeled by year and country, and there's a sealed envelope marked 'Open only in case of company emergency.' Open it, Maya said, putting the phone on speaker. They heard paper rustling. Then Maya's mother gasped. It's a letter to you, Maya, and there's a key. Read the letter, Mom. Her mother's voice shook as she read. Maya, my brilliant girl. If you're reading this, then Wellington International faces a crisis that threatens its existence. What you need to know is that your grandmother was not just careful, she was prophetic. In 1970, I established a parallel company in Hong Kong, Johnson Wellington Cultural Trust. It was registered under my maiden name, Johnson, and my mother's maiden name, Chen. Yes, the same Chen as Lily Chen. She was my cousin, though we kept that secret for both our protection. This company holds copies of every major contract, every relationship map, every cultural protocol we established for Asian markets. More importantly, it holds something else. Trust accounts for our original partners' families, managed continuously for 50 years. Even after William bought me out, I maintained these relationships privately. The key opens a safety deposit box at HSBC Hong Kong, branch 001, box 1971. Inside, you'll find everything you need to restore what Harrison is trying to destroy. But more importantly, you'll find letters from our original partners' descendants, pledging support if Wellington International ever needed help. The Chinese have a saying, Fu Bu Guo San Dai. Wealth doesn't pass 3 generations. But relationships? Those are eternal if properly maintained. Use this wisely, my dear one. And remember, sometimes the greatest power is not in what you threaten to take away, but in what you promise to restore. Forever your loving grandmother, Elsie. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Marcus spoke, his voice rough with emotion. She protected the company even after we pushed her out. She maintained relationships we didn't even know existed. We need to get to Hong Kong, Sarah said. Immediately. I'll go, Maya said. But I need something from you first, Marcus. Anything. Call Harrison. Tell him we want to meet. Tomorrow noon at Le Bernardin. Marcus looked confused. Why there? Because that's where this all started, and that's where it's going to end. The next day, while Sarah flew to Hong Kong with the key and a team of lawyers, Maya and Marcus sat at the same table where they'd first confronted each other. Harrison arrived 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 lawyers, his arrogance intact. Come to negotiate? He sneered. 50 million is the price, non-negotiable. Actually, Maya said calmly, we're here to make you an offer. She placed a tablet on the table, showing a video conference with Sarah in Hong Kong. Behind her stood a dozen Asian business leaders, all in their 60s and 70s. Sarah spoke. Mr. Harrison, these are the children and grandchildren of Wellington International's original Asian partners. They've just informed me that if our company falls, they're prepared to launch a new venture, Johnson Chen International, with Maya as CEO and full backing from their conglomerates. Combined value, approximately $3 billion. Harrison's smirk faltered. You're bluffing. One of the men on screen stepped forward. Mr. Harrison, I am David Liu, CEO of Liu Industries. My father worked with Elsie Johnson in 1969. She helped him when American banks wouldn't even let him open an account. We have waited 50 years to repay that debt. Another woman spoke. I am Jennifer Yamamoto, president of Yamamoto Tech. Elsie Johnson taught my mother English and helped her navigate Harvard Business School in 1972. We stand with her granddaughter. One by one, they declared their support, each sharing a story of how Elsie Johnson had helped their families when no one else would. Maya turned back to Harrison. You have a choice. Release your ransomware attack and destroy Wellington International. We'll simply rebuild as Johnson Chen International, and you'll face federal prosecution for corporate espionage, because yes, the FBI will eventually trace this back to you. Or, Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Or you return the stolen data, resign from the board effective immediately, and we pretend this never happened. You keep your reputation, your pension, your freedom, but you disappear from our world forever. Harrison's lawyers whispered frantically in his ears. He looked between them, the tablet showing the Asian partners and Maya's steady gaze. "I need guarantees," he said finally. "Legal immunity." Sarah spoke from Hong Kong. "Already drafted. Sign now, or we call the FBI with evidence we've uncovered linking you to the offshore accounts." Harrison's hand shook as he signed the documents. As soon as the ink dried, Maya's phone buzzed. It confirmed the ransomware had been deactivated, all data restored. Harrison stood to leave, but Maya stopped him. "One more thing. You're going to record a video, right now, announcing your retirement and your full support for the new direction of Wellington International." "That wasn't part of—" "It is now," Marcus said coldly. "Unless you'd prefer we release the recording we have of you admitting to the ransomware attack just now." Harrison looked between them, realizing he'd been completely outmaneuvered. He recorded the video, his endorsement hollow but convincing enough. Then he left, a broken man who'd gambled everything on hate and lost to love. As the restaurant returned to its normal bustle, Claudette approached with champagne. "On the house," she said with a knowing smile. "Though I have to say your meetings here are becoming rather dramatic for our usual clientele." Maya laughed, the tension finally releasing. On the tablet, Sarah held up an old photograph she'd found in the safety deposit box. William Wellington and Elsie Johnson, young and hopeful, standing in front of their first office. A handwritten sign between them reading, "Building Bridges Across Worlds." "We did it, Grandma," Maya whispered, touching the screen. 6 months later, Wellington International celebrated its most profitable quarter in company history. The Bronx internship program had expanded to include 50 students. Sarah had successfully negotiated partnerships across 15 countries. Marcus, in a move that shocked everyone, had stepped down as CEO, appointing Maya to the position while he took on the role of chairman emeritus, focusing on healing relationships with partners Harrison had alienated. The ceremony was held at Columbia University, in the very lecture hall where Elsie Johnson had taught and William Wellington had learned. Mrs. Chen, now 90 but still sharp, gave the keynote address. 50 years ago, she said, two people from different worlds dared to believe that understanding could triumph over prejudice. They were forced apart by the fears of their time, but they planted seeds that would bloom in the next generation. Today we see that harvest. As Maya took the podium, she looked out at the audience, her mother in the front row crying happy tears, the Bronx interns, dressed in their first business suits, the Asian partners who'd flown in for the celebration, Marcus and Sarah sitting together, having found in business the relationship they'd lost as father and daughter. My grandmother once said that language isn't about words, it's about building bridges between worlds. But bridges aren't built by one person or even one generation. They're built by everyone who chooses connection over division, understanding over ignorance, courage over comfort. She paused, seeing a familiar face in the back of the room. It was the young man who'd live-streamed the original confrontation at Le Bernardin, the video that had started everything. He gave her a thumbs up. "Tonight, I want to announce something new. The Johnson Wellington Foundation, funded equally by our company and our Asian partners, will provide full scholarships to students studying international relations, languages, and cultural studies. But there's one requirement. Each scholar must speak at least 3 languages and come from a community traditionally excluded from international business." The applause was thunderous. As Maya stepped down from the podium, she found herself face to face with Thomas Harrison's daughter, Patricia, a young woman in her 30s, who'd watched her father's rise and fall with shame. "Ms. Johnson," Patricia said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for my father, and to ask, would the foundation consider someone like me? I speak 4 languages, and I want to spend my life undoing the damage people like my father have done." Maya studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "Send me your application. Everyone deserves a chance to build bridges instead of walls." Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Maya stood alone in the lecture hall, looking at the wall of photographs the university had installed. Images documenting the hidden history of Elsie Johnson and William Wellington's partnership. "You did it, you know." She turned to find Marcus standing there, older now, softer around the edges. "We did it," she corrected. "No," he said firmly. "You did something I never could. You turned my father's shame into pride, my company's weakness into strength. You honored both our grandparents' legacies while creating something entirely new." He handed her an envelope. "This was in my father's papers. I've been carrying it for months, waiting for the right moment." Inside was a yellowed document and a black and white photograph. The document was a will, dated 1995, from William Wellington. The photograph showed him at Elsie's funeral in 2010, standing in the back, unnoticed by the mourners. Maya read aloud, "I leave 30% of Wellington International to Professor Elsie Johnson or her descendants, to be claimed when the world is ready to accept that greatness knows no color, wisdom knows no gender, and bridges once built can never truly be destroyed." She looked up at Marcus, stunned. He tried to make it right. He did, but it needed you to complete it. You're not just running Wellington International, Maya. You're fulfilling a covenant between two people who believed the future could be better than their present. As they walked out together into the New York night, snow began to fall, dusting the city in white. Maya thought of that night at Le Bernardin, when a millionaire's mockery had become a miracle. She thought of her grandmother, teaching languages to children who the world said didn't matter. She thought of William Wellington, carrying his guilt and hope in equal measure until his death. But mostly, she thought of tomorrow, of the young people who would walk through doors that had been barricaded, who would speak in tongues that had been silenced, who would build bridges that had been burned. Her phone buzzed with a message from one of the Bronx interns. "Ms. J, I just closed my first international deal, in Mandarin. My grandmother is crying. Thank you for believing in us." Maya smiled, tucking the phone away. The snow continued to fall, transforming the familiar streets into something new and full of possibility. Somewhere in the city, a young person was learning their third language. Somewhere else, a boardroom that had never seen a face like theirs was about to. And somewhere, Maya was certain, Elsie Johnson and William Wellington were finally at peace. The bridge they'd started building 50 years ago was finally complete. But Maya knew better. Bridges are never really complete. Each generation adds new spans, new supports, new pathways, and as she walked through the snowy night toward her future, she could already hear the footsteps of those who would follow, speaking in 100 languages, building 1,000 bridges, turning the impossible into the inevitable. The girl from the Bronx who spoke 9 languages had become the woman who helped the world speak one, the language of human possibility. And this was only the beginning.